At a point, usually without any formal warning or any given idea, the separation you've been living inside starts to feel artificial. It starts to feel unrealistic. Not false in some intellectual bullshit way, just strained, just like you've been holding something apart that doesn't actually want to be apart. You notice it in small moments, maybe at first you notice it in things like watching your thoughts arrive without asking you, feeling some sort of emotion arise in your mind before you've actually decided what you want to feel, catching yourself reacting and only later naming it as your thought. There's a quiet confusion there, there's a quiet disillusion, there's a detachment from you and your thoughts. And if I didn't choose this thought, in what sense is this thought mine? If I didn't author this feeling, who exactly is responsible for it? Now, non-duality doesn't arrive as an answer. Non-duality arrives as a discomfort to this complex paradox in your mind. Because the idea that there is some solid you at the center of an experience starts to feel less and less like the truth, and instead more like a habit you have to upkeep. A useful one, for sure. It's definitely useful to be present and to be at the center of your emotions. And it is necessary, as a matter of fact, to function within your life. But it's not as stable as you once thought. Instead, you start to see that the boundary between the thinker and the thought is so much thinner than you were actually taught it was. That the line between the observer and the observed starts to flicker. It starts to come in and out a lot more. And that is where things actually get unsettling. That's where you start comprehending the weight and the genuine curiosity, I can't think of the word I'm thinking of the situation. Now, we are trained and we're raised to believe that there's somebody inside us steering our mind, steering us to do this, do that, blah, blah, blah. There's somebody watching the world behind your eyes. There's somebody inside your brain thinking of everything. There's somebody in charge. That's the key thing that you have to think about. Is there somebody actually in charge? But when you look for that person, when you actually start searching for them inside of you, you don't find what you would actually expect. Honestly, you would never find it. Instead, what you find is sensations. You find memories. You find language. You find reflex. You find responses. You find movement. But you don't find a center which is separate from what's actually happening. Non-duality doesn't say you do not exist. That is the caricature of non-duality. What it points to is so much subtler, and it's a lot more disturbing, but it's also comforting if you come to the realization of it. It's the fact that what you call you might actually be inseparable from what you are experiencing. That the wave was never a part of the ocean. That the division was something added after the fact. It's something that you implemented after the event actually happened, instead of something being inherent. Once that starts to land, even lightly, even if it lands just like this, the tiniest, softest landing in your mind, the world feels completely different to you. It doesn't feel mystical. Instead, it feels more intimate. It feels less filtered. It feels more raw. You stop feeling like a subject which is trapped inside of an object-filled universe, and instead, more like something that is just happening alongside everything else. Thoughts don't feel as personal. Emotions don't feel as accusatory. Instead, what they do is they arise, they pass, they dissolve, and they don't need a manager to take it from this step to this step to this step. They just do it by themselves. It's just the way they act. And this may feel relieving at first. To some people, it may feel loosening. It may feel like you have less pressure to actually control everything going on in your life. Less need, less necessity to defend the identity so fiercely and so vigorously. If the self isn't a fixed thing in your mind, then maybe you don't have to keep maintaining it so aggressively. Maybe you don't actually have to keep explaining yourself and perfecting yourself and justifying every single internal movement. But relief is not where the story ends. Relief, you can't just have relief. Everyone knows that you can't just end on relief. Because if there was no hard boundary between you and what was happening, responsibility would start to feel so much stranger. Agency would start to feel different. And suffering, oh, I just smashed my elbow. Suffering would become a lot harder to actually localize. When that pain arises, who exactly is it happening to? Ask yourself that. When fear appears, who owns that fear? Does it impact you or does it impact your brain? You cannot just point inwards anymore and say that is me without any sort of hesitation. And that's why non-duality isn't some comforting truth which is a see-all do-all in the long run. What it does do is remove a lot of the familiar furniture. It removes the idea of a thinker and a world and a controller and a controlled, and it merges them together. You start to see how much of your life has genuinely been organized around maintaining that separation, and how often you've said blanket statements such as, "This is happening to me," instead of acknowledging the fact that if you're already a part of what is happening, it's not happening directly to you. It questions how often you've treated experience such as a direct attack instead of a process that you are inseparable from. And once you come to this non-dual form, obviously you can't resonate with it instantly, you can't just become non-dual, but once you start seeing the world in a different light to what you once did, you start to see how seductive the old model actually was. And it's comforting enough to believe that there is a you who could have done things differently. It's a you who was fully in charge at one point, and a you who is separate enough from the mess to stand above it and clean it. Now, non-duality takes away that comfort, and it doesn't do it cruelly, but instead it simply does it quietly, and it doesn't replace it with any sort of certainty or acknowledgement. All it does is replace it and make your life a lot more intimate. You don't stand outside your life anymore. Instead, what you are is inside of it, as you always were. The danger is now trying to turn into a philosophy, turn this idea, this thought process, into a philosophy that you actually possess and you live by. The moment that you say, "I understand non-duality, I am non-dual," you've already stepped back into separation. You are no longer separated. No longer connected. What the hell did I say? Understanding this becomes another identity that separates you from yourself. And it becomes another position. It becomes another place to stand apart from what just is. Non-duality is not something you hold or possess or live by. Instead, it's something that keeps undoing the one who does want to hold it. That is why it shows up in flashes. That's why you may resonate with it from time to time. It's moments where it's the sense of me versus this dropping out briefly. Instead, it's just walking, it's just listening to music, and it's grief, and it's love, and it's stillness, and it's moments where there's just experience. There's no commentary behind the experience. There's no you labeling it as this is this, and I'm so excited that this is this, and I'm so happy that this happened, but I'm sad that this happened. There's no ownership behind it. And then inevitably, the self will rush back in to claim it. You cannot fully become non-dual. You can never reach an enlightened state of you just resonating with the world. There has to be someone to say that just happened to me, and there has to be someone to reassert that boundary. But that doesn't mean you can't keep trying. That is fine. That's just how life works. That's how you've been raised. That's how everybody's brain works. The point is not to live without a self. Like I said, that is impossible. You cannot do that. Instead, what the point is to stop mistaking the self as a center of reality, to stop centering your entire world around you. It's to see life as a process instead of a ruler. It's to see patterns instead of commanders, and something, understanding the fact that some things arise within the experience, and it's not the thing that stands separate from the experience that affects your life. I'm quite yapping right now, but it's strange because my mind just continues talking. When you start to comprehend the fact, and when it starts to sink in with your mind, when you start finally, again, I can't say resonating with it, but once you start, like I said, viewing the world in a different light that you did before, suffering changes its texture. Suffering never vanishes from your life, but it becomes less personal to you and less accusatory. It becomes less of a verdict on who you actually are, and instead it simply just becomes a process of life. Thoughts lose some of their authority, and feelings lose some of their teeth and the sharpness of their bites. You stop fighting the experiences quite so hard because you stop treating them as if it's something other than you. It's simply a process affecting the world you live in, and not even the world you live in, just the world. Non-duality doesn't solve any questions, and it doesn't give you any answers. Instead, it dissolves the question that you didn't realize you were asking the whole time. And that question is, I'm sure you've asked it yourself a million times because I know I have. That question is, why is this happening to me? And in its place, after it dissolves that question, there is something a lot quieter, and it's not peace, it's not solitude, it's not certainty even, it's not any sort of finalized thought process, it's not any sort of fully fixed emotion. It is simply the strange recognition that whatever actually is happening, you are not separate from it, and you never ever were.